Chapter 26, The Poem Barn. I've sat in this school office plenty of times, usually because I'm in some sort of trouble and I'm waiting to hear what Mrs. Wilmer has to say about it. Today that stuff feels like nothing. I drop my head and close my eyes. I try to get to better thoughts, something I love to do, or a place I love to go. No surprise, everything connects to Frenchie. He's in all my scenes. That thought takes me close to home. Our friend Anzie Maylord owns the blueberry farm at the top of the place we call Sundrop Meadow. You could say our big old backyard meets her big old backyard, but it's a good hike between our houses. Pop jokes about this little piece of bad luck, that the wild blueberries haven't managed to creep onto our part of the barrens. Still hoping Mother Nature will do us the favor. He says it every season. The good luck is we have an open invite from Anzie. July through the beginning of September, we head up with our buckets a couple of times a week. We go in the early evening after all the machine picking stops. We check the perimeter where berries get left behind. But hand picking in the low bush is tough. We work our way up to the enclosure where Anzie keeps her cultivated high bush berries. That's the place to fill a bucket. Anzie is neighborly, and we are neighborly back. We bring her bread or pesto or flavored vinegar. She gives us a rosy grin every time we see her, then tosses her thick curly braid over her shoulder. But her boyfriend, Carney Huggins, who lives with her now, not so neighborly, not so welcoming. We see him more than I want to, sometimes more than we see Anzie, because her pie baking business keeps her in the kitchen. Carney does the pie deliveries, but he finishes early. Come afternoon, he's doing this or that around the fields. He's tall, skinny, and scruffy. Sun-tanned to a crisp. His hair is even messier than mine, cap on or cap off. Carney has never chased us out, but he scowls and he looks at our buckets like we're thieves. Don't know how he got Huggins for a last name. Hard to picture him doing much hugging, though I suppose he hugs Anzie. He's mighty more friendly when the parents come with us, even if that means Cedar too, running around the fields like a miniature tornado, which he does. When I'm up there with Frenchie, I can't help hoping we won't see Carney. Helps to stay low and stick to picking. Picking is one of the things that Frenchie gets. From the first time he watched me do it, he understood how the string on the bucket went around your neck and left you two hands to pick with. He knows ripe from not ripe, and he cleans the bushes like he's a machine. The only thing that slows him down is stopping to watch the barn swallows skimming over the field catching bugs. Or if he sees the cedar waxwings come in for a meal. They love the blueberries. So do the deer. Natural pruners, Anzie Maylord calls them. She always shrugs and says, I've got no grudges with the wildlife. Might have been 3 weeks ago Frenchie and I were up there filling buckets with berries to bring home for freezing. I was thumbing clusters of fat blues into my bucket, slapping mosquitoes and daydreaming. Suddenly Frenchie was on the move. I knew why. He wanted to get to Anzie's barn. Wait up, I'm coming, I started trotting. I held my bucket to keep it from bumping against my belly. My backpack wobbled. I opened my mouth wide and let out a sound. Like a huge yawn. Frenchie, wait for me. I was giggling as we came alongside the big barn near Anzie's house. The barn is covered in rows and rows of old shingles. There are words painted on the side of the barn in big white block letters. It's a poem that Anzie wrote. Sun, rain, wind, swept, bud, blossom, berry. Sweet earth, roots kept. Make a soul merry. Oh, every time we reach the barn, Frenchie stops. He waits for me to read. I used to go right up to his ear and say, Son, because I liked the way Frenchie brought his shoulder up when my breath tickled him. I'm a pest, I confess. But there was more to it. When I said, sun, rain, wind, swept, into Frenchie's ear. I was trying to put the words into him. But I know his ear is not some sort of tunnel into the depths of him. One day I realized something so big I had to say it out loud, so I would hear it. Why do you want to do that anyway, Aurora Pauline Petriquin? Why change him? He's perfect, perfectly Frenchy. I caught up to him, I always do, and stood beside him. We faced the side of the barn. I took a huge breath and recited the poem loudly. Sun, rain, wind, swept, bud, blossom, berry, sweet, earth, roots, kept, make us all merry. I threw my arms wide. I shook out my shoulders. I took another breath. I was ready to go again when I heard, Aurora! There stood Carney Huggins, backward cap and one eye closed like he might have a headache. I popped my eyes open. Carney knew my name? Could not believe that. Be quiet. He pushed the words at me, stuck a hard T sound on the end. He sighed. Then for a second or two it seemed like Carney Huggins looked past me to where Frenchie stood still, staring at the poem on the barn. First time I ever saw Carney really look at Frenchie, and for once, Carney's face didn't look so cranky. Oh, I should have let that moment last longer. Sorry for being too loud, I said. Frenchie likes the poem. Yeah, that's fine. Carney looked back at me, scowling again. But do you have to shout it? Oh, well, no. But maybe it'll scare the fruit flies off the berries if I do, I offered. His shoulders sagged. Or not, I said. Are you done picking? He stuck his chin toward my bucket. Late season, you know. Not much left. And Mr. Plaid? Carney actually smiled for a second. Looks like he did all right. How about you head out now? He gave his head a little swing toward the back of the property. Oh, not so fast, I said. I turned to show him my backpack. Mom and Pop sent 2 loaves of sourdough for Anzie, and you too, I guess. That's really nice, he said. But he sounded like he had a stomach cramp. Drop them off at the kitchen. Quietly if you can, huh? Sure, I said. Anything to make your soul merry. I jumped and pointed at the barn, almost spilled my berry bucket. I gave him a grin. Shh! Carney shook his head once more. Oops, sorry, too loud. He turned away and set off for Anzie's vegetable patch. I turned to Frenchie and whispered, Come on, she-shy. Nothing new there. Frenchie followed me to Anzie's kitchen door. I pulled the 2 loaves of sourdough out of my pack. I decided not to knock because maybe I'd done enough bothering. I left the bread in a delivery crate on her bench. On the way home, I told Frenchie, You know, it's possible that Carney Huggins and I won't ever be a good mix. But you know what, Frenchie? I think he kind of likes you. Maybe you're his kind of kid. Chapter 27. Spotting the Spotted Deer. When I want to get outside, which is always, but Frenchie is feeling lazy or hard to reach, I make him a promise. This will be a bird hike, I'll say. If that doesn't get him, I push harder. Hey, this is the Blue Jay talking to you, Frenchie. I flap my arms. Let's get outside and fly. That gets him up, and it's all good because we both get what we want. About a year ago, we started out on one of those bird hikes up Sundrop Meadow, not far from Anzie's. Good day for sightings. Frenchie was flapping, whistling, and tweeting every few minutes. I kept slowing to a stroll to make sure he caught up to me. I checked the ground for rocks. Nothing exciting there. I was starting to feel bored until, on the path ahead, I heard a swish. Then a clacking sound like rock against rock. A flash of white and brown streaked across the trail. I halted. So did Frenchie. What? I whispered. I thought someone's goat was running loose. The animal stepped in the high grass under the twiggy trees. It turned back and looked right at us. I caught my breath. Not a goat. A deer? Yeah, because fly swatter ears. But this deer was not like any I had ever seen. It was spotted from head to hoofs with a lot of white on its coat. The tip of its nose looked extra round, like a black rubber ball. Its snout was white and broader than I'd ever seen on a whitetail, with a dark marking along the center. A pair of brown diamond-shaped patches gave the deer a perfect mask, pretty as a stuffed toy, with dark eyes shining out and white eyebrows arching upward. Wow, I whispered so low. Now, Frenchy, I hoped he would get what I was about to say. You don't bother with birds at a time like this. Then I tried not to breathe. Frenchy stood still right beside me. I was with the best silent deer watching person in the world. We'd seen plenty of white-tailed deer together, enough to know that they don't hang around for long. Sometimes I wonder if they know there are a lot of hunters in Maine. Stay, stay. I sent that spotted deer a good, hard-thinking message, and maybe that got through. Big, long seconds went by while we looked each other over. The deer was small, not the same way a fawn is small, even though I guessed it was young. This deer's body was thicker than a fawn's. Its legs were shorter, but strong, or so I told myself. It watched us, it blinked, and it seemed unafraid. I daydreamed. This deer had come on the path because of us, Frenchy and me, like an end of summer gift. It must want to know us and take apples or sunflower seeds from our hands, except we didn't have any, and it wasn't quite that close, but almost. I imagined it would let us touch its warm neck and lead us into the woods, maybe take us to a deposit of stones, maybe to a vein full of chunks of dark green or blue tourmaline. Hello, I whispered. The deer twitched its ears. Slowly, I raised one hand, palm up. I stepped forward. A stick snapped. The deer sprang away. That spotty white coat flickered through the woods and was gone. Ah, dang, I said. Sorry, Frenchy, I broke the spell. He was already heading back along the path for home. I caught up to him, passed him, and jumped in front of him. Wait! Frenchy stopped. You saw it, right? Frenchy stared. Slow blink. Come on, I thought. Tell me you saw that crazy, strange deer, Frenchy. All he did was hoist his needlepoint purse up into his armpit. I stepped out of the way. He started walking again. I stayed behind him and mumbled, Do you think I scared it off when I put my hand out? That was dumb of me, huh? I followed his plaid shirt. Weirdest creature ever. I didn't even know what it was at first. Never seen a deer like that. Never heard of a deer like that. I'll look it up, though. We'll see what I can find out. I thought about some key words to use. Spotted deer. In the woods. Oh, state of Maine. I guess that should be in there too, huh? I'll tell you everything I learn, I promised. But what do you say we keep it a secret for now? Easy ask. Frenchy couldn't tell anyone about the deer. Of course, that also meant if I went home and said I'd seen a most fantastically enchanting, rare spotted deer, and nobody believed me, Frenchy couldn't back me up either. Hope we see it again, I said. Wait! I'm going to leave a marker before we get too far. I dug my heel into the ground and scratched out a big X. Nah. A good rain will wash that right away. I picked up a thick stick, tall as me, and tried to twist it into the ground. It wouldn't go. So I jumped on it and twirled it with all my weight. And don't you know, that stick broke and I fell. I put a big new scrape in my arm. Dang! Hey, Frenchy, wait up! He didn't. I rubbed my bloody arm, and that stung like heck. But I couldn't care much, not after seeing what we'd seen. Woohoo! I shouted. I wound my arms around like a double windmill and ran to catch up to Frenchy. Chapter 28. About Piebald Deer. A few days after we saw the spotted deer, Frenchy had all his bird prints arranged on the floor like quilt squares. Corners matched up just right. I settled beside him and inched the tips of my fingers right up close to the edge of the first row of bird prints. If I moved one, he would straighten it. Gracia says he has a strong sense of order. So, I said, I learned all about our spotty deer. First, it's very rare. Get what I'm saying? Not so many walking this earth. I wasn't sure how much to tell him. I'm always guessing about that. But this time, it was more that I needed to talk. There's a sad part, Frenchie. Piebalds don't do so well. It's kind of like if you see spots and patches on the outside, it means there's other stuff wrong on the inside, like messed up bones and weak organs. Piebalds don't live as long as most deer. Yeah, it gets me right here in my heart. Frenchie stared at his bird pictures. He squeezed his hands into little fists. He's listening, I thought, and he is sorry like I am. I flopped on my back, stared at the ceiling. I hope we get to see that piebald again. I want to check up on it. Make sure it's okay, I said. And if we see it, let's follow it, for as long as it'll let us. That means we can't scare it, so I won't reach at it, and you can't flap and tweet, okay? We just follow. Can you do that for me? Frenchie popped up off the floor and made a beeline for our kitchen. I hadn't even noticed, but Pop was running the mixer, making bread dough. Frenchie never misses that. I rolled up on one elbow and looked at his bird pictures, laid out so perfectly. I reached for the nuthatch print, the one Frenchie got from the woman at the cinnamon-smelling shop, Troviosity. There were two birds in the painting, one heading up the tree, one heading down. I turned it upside down, wondering if Frenchie would notice. When the mixer stopped and he came back, he knew. In a millisecond, he turned the nuthatch picture right side up. Okay, I whispered near his ear. So if you get that, I'm going to count on you to get what I said about the piebald deer. Frenchie pulled up his shoulder. I laughed. You are so ear ticklish, I said. Chapter 29. Special Delivery. Carney Huggins was half done with pie deliveries. He was coasting at a good clip along Pumpkinville Road when a strange something bounded out in front of him and stopped. It will move. That's the last thought Carney had before he jammed on his brakes. He threw his arm in front of the stack of pie boxes on the passenger seat beside him. A matter of reflex, that was. But in a sudden stop, everything that's not bolted down will keep going forward. Carney did, his clipboard did, 5 out of 7 pies did, even the pair of 5-gallon buckets that had been riding in the bed of the pickup did. They rolled right up over the top of the cab and bounced off the hood of the truck. Now they were rolling in the road. In the next few seconds, Carney did several things. He slumped in his seat and swore. He pushed his cap back to the top of his head. He shut down his engine, and he smelled blueberry pie like he'd never smelled it before, which was saying a lot. Carney blinked. He scanned the side of the road for the animal. What was that anyway? He'd seen something similar, a deer, but not a normal one, during a blinding sunset in the Barrens a few days back. He'd gotten an only slightly better look today, but that was a deer. Had to be the same one. Peculiar as could be, spotted and prettier than a prize-winning pony, or something that had walked out of a fairy tale. Who the heck was he going to tell that to? Carney looked around the cab of the truck. He'd managed to save only 2 of the pies, or so he thought. The 3 pie boxes that happened to be below his hand had probably hit the glove compartment. The 2 that happened to be above his hand must have hit the dashboard. Hardly mattered, because all 5 of those pies had come to rest on the floor of the passenger's side of the truck. Some had their lids flung open, revealing a serious misarrangement of runny purple berries and broken golden crusts. As for the 2 pies Carney thought he had saved, well, a peek under each lid disclosed that they, too, had gone far forward inside their boxes. Pie pile-ups, Carney muttered. Boy, did they smell good. He popped his door and slid out of the truck. Best to get his buckets out of the road. They were still rolling side to side, seeking a level. Carney figured, and he laughed, because there was nothing level about Pumpkinville Road. Both buckets were fatally busted. Not surprising, he set them into the bed of the pickup. Now, what to do about the pies? He opened the passenger side, and the fresh baked aroma struck him again. Oh, Ansie did make the best blueberry pies. Carney lifted the boxes and their loose contents up into the seat of the truck. He propped on one buttock inside the open door. The pies were unsaleable, but not inedible. Hand pies. That's what Carney thought as he slid his fingers under a nice half sandwich sized pocket of crust. Deftly he dumped the oozing berry filling into his mouth and folded the pastry in after it. As he savored that cheekful, he glanced out through the truck's back window. He thought he saw something. A flash of plaid, was it? Plaid on Pumpkinville Road could only mean someone was around. And here he was in an embarrassing mess of pies and broken buckets. He was in no mood to chat. He stayed low, pushed another scrap of pie into his mouth. He snuck a few more peeks out the truck windows. Where did that plaid go? Had his eyes played a trick? Some minutes later, Carney was either sick of pie or about to be sick because of pie. He sucked purple syrup off his thumb. Time to go back and find out what Ansie wanted to do about the failed delivery. On the way, he'd think how to describe the weird deer that had caused all the trouble this morning. Carney shut the passenger's side door. He used his elbow and his shirt sleeve to polish the dust off the painted side of the truck. The letter spelled out Ansie's poem. That's what she called it, a poem. Carney wasn't so sure, thought it hardly mattered. He did so love Ansie, but alone on Pumpkinville Road, he had a few thoughts, such as, wasn't it more of a list of words? Could a list be a poem? Ansie sure thought so. She'd put it on everything that had anything to do with the farm, including the long barn, including this truck. Sun, rain, wind, swept. He wondered, not for the first time. Shouldn't that be windswept? Bud, blossom, berry. Okay, yes, it was a blueberry farm, and alliteration was a happy thing. Sweet earth roots kept. That seemed a bit out of order. Make a soul merry. Bleh, said Carney. That last line seemed especially discordant because the only way he could hear it now was the way that neighbor girl had recited it. No, screamed it on an otherwise serene evening. Aurora, that was her name. She was Ed Petriquin's kid. Carney knew Ed from around town, and as a neighbor, since Ed owned all that land adjacent to Ansie's and had built the A-frame down the hill. Nice enough folks, and Ansie was very fond of them. But oh, that Aurora! And her busy little brother, whose name Carney could never remember. Birch? No. Oakley? No. But it had something to do with with some tree or other. Pine cone, he said out loud. Then he snorted a laugh which burned a blueberry. Anyway, those Petriquin kids were out of control. Carney wasn't much of a kid person, and he knew it, which was why he was surprised by the brand new soft spot he felt for Aurora's friend, the boy who didn't talk. Wasn't that all kind of ironic? The quietest kid he'd ever run across paired with the loudest one on earth. Carney remembered looking at the boy as he stared at Ansie's poem on the side of the barn. Unremarkable pose. And Carney wasn't sure he could read. If he thought anything, it was that the kid had always seemed absent or empty. Wrong. That boy was taking in something from having Ansie's verse shouted at him. Carney could still see the boy's dark eyelashes closing down, that slow blink. Why did some scene stick in the memory? Then he remembered something else about the boy. The plaid shirt.